everybody. This is Digging into the Future, and today we're discussing GEAB number 152. And I'm here with Marie-Hélène Caillol, Chief Editor of the GEAB, and my name is Véronique Swinkels. Marie-Hélène, let's dig into it.
Yes.
The name of the GEAB this month, Reboot, Can the Western System Survive? So what's the message behind this title?
Yes, the message is also we try to have doubled it with the cover, which shows this plumbing system where the big water pump is being reopened, and we see how it's could pose a problem to have this big flow of water running all of a sudden into this very complex plumbing machinery with very small pipes in the end. The image, we hope, makes it clearer. Our idea is that after a year with the socio-economic model, which is a question of plumbing, flows of money, flows of exchanges of products, etc. So it is this water that we see. After a year having slowed down dramatically this whole system, we fear that the old Western centered socio-economic system, if it's restarted too fast, could really experience very big dramatic disruptions. In fact, we already start seeing some. We are already in 2021 indeed beginning to witness shortages, disruptions of in the production of this or that. We have lots of examples, and there will be more in the next GEAB as well, of the shortages which result in inflation already. So we see indeed already this machine starting to shake, even though we haven't completely started again. So that's our fear, and we've been at it in the past 2 months, in fact, and so we decided to really hammer this idea in this February edition.
Yeah, so the focus in this edition is really on the US, and there are several angles to the story. What I see, and one of the angles actually is also on the relationship between US and Europe, and on foreign policy. Is that something that has been developing already during the Trump presidency, or do you think it's something more specific now that Biden is in office?
No, what we see is that Trump has been a great opportunity for the Europeans to reposition themselves, to work on their independence, on their strategic and economic, but mostly strategic independence, monetary as well, independence. So we've been following that during these past 4 years. And what we fear, therefore, with the arrival of Biden is that with this big talk about what are the camp of the allies, this alliance, etc., we're going to have a stop to this process, which we saw as a positive one. We think we need a strong Europe, independent Europe, to position itself between in the middle of the rivalry between the US and Asia and China, etc. And instead, that's a take that we have for ages with the GEAB, that we don't think we need to be allied with the US, but also completely open to the emerging world, and of course Asia and China in particular. And this requires a very tactical, strategical positioning of Europe. And which is going to be hampered by this new presidency that we have at a time. Biden is coming at the moment, at the end of this first year of pandemic, which has dramatically weakened the Western camp in general, but the US in particular. And the more the US will be weakened, the more dangerous it can become in many ways, geopolitically speaking, of course, financially, economically, with risks of we mentioned how very much the risk of inflation and the impact on everyone. But mostly what we are very worried is the geopolitical situation, where the US would require from their allies to cut relations from the rest of the world, from Asia and China in particular, with, of course, dramatic consequences on our economy. Of course, I was mentioning the fact that we already are witnessing disruptions in production chains, etc. So due to the COVID, but reinforced by geopolitical tensions coming from the US camp. Voilà. So we see many reasons for Europeans to keep the track that they have already used in the past 4 years under the Trump era. They should remain very much on that line, being open, of course, to the US partner, but also on track with this objective of strategic independence.
Yes, and is there also, if you look at, for example, the level of American debt, so you say, okay, I think the GEAB has been following this huge level of debt already for quite some time, but I have the feeling that you're more alarmist now on this issue, that in a way the dollar is just losing its grip on the financial system. What would happen with the inflation or hyperinflation if that would arrive? How would that affect also Europe?
Yeah, well, indeed, that's one of our big worries. We see that the US, after already $3 trillion having been voted last year to address the pandemic's crisis, in recovery plans of all sorts, in emergency plans, in fact. So they're adding another 2 trillion. I think it's been voted recently after, in fact, the last GEAB was published, but we knew it would, because they don't seem to have much option other than voting that, except that it reaches 5 trillion in 1 year. And that means 20% of the gigantic debt that they already had. Everybody thinks that the US is a special magical power on the earth and in the universe, and that it can produce debt like that forever without producing inflation. And we analyze indeed that the fact that the international status of the dollar has enabled until now to sort of hide inflation on one side in the markets, for instance, financial markets. More and more economists draw the attention to the fact that these rising, constantly rising stock markets are where the inflation is. In fact, the debt-related inflation is, and as well as exported inflation. We have in countries, in emerging countries, etc., which like Argentina, of course, among them, very close to the US dollar system, base dollar system, which have experienced dramatic inflation. So until now, the US has been fine securing its level of pricing due to that. But we think that first of all, this 20% added to their debt, plus the change of in the international monetary system with a strengthened, de facto strengthened euro, emerging yuan, and many more reasons that we analyze there, which I won't be able to describe them all, creates the conditions for indeed an inflation really due also to weakening dollar as well. So there are many reasons that make it now envisageable, not that inflation is already there, but that it could be, and that's what we analyze too in this GEAB, is how this inflation runs the risk of turning to hyperinflation in the US in particular, but of course with the consequences on Europe.
And is there also what you analyze? It's also very interesting, I think, is how, in a way, the European recovery plans versus the US recovery plans have a totally different outcome, probably, on the fact that if we recover from this crisis and not go back to business as usual, but prepare ourselves for a different future, that Europe would be better positioned in a way the recovery plans work out. Is that something that you still see? I think it was discussed in the last GEAB as well.
Yes, we still see that. This is something indeed through our researches we became aware of the difference of intention of the recovery plans in Europe, which are very future oriented. They're even called one of them, part of the lines that have been voted are called the next generation plan or something like that. And so it's really about investing into infrastructures of the future, into the green model, into the digitalization. So it's really future oriented. Because society is rather functional is quite functional in the EU country to the US, where they have this huge crisis of their social system, of their infrastructures, etc. So the money, even though it's a lot more money than what we've put into the what are on the table, but even with all this money, they are mostly patching the system. They are mostly signing checks to people so that people survive, basically. So it's completely different. So of course, with 5 trillion, you can imagine that part of it will go into the future, but we tend to fear that is it really going into future infrastructures, etc., or is part of all this these gigantic amounts of money going to mostly what is the biggest worry of the US today? It's the weakening of their military system, and therefore is the money going to the Pentagon, and in fact, and we see today that the first 1 month after taking office, Biden is already sending ships and warplanes in Syria, in South China Sea, etc. When the whole American society is really in need for help. What are the choices being made currently by the US establishment? That's a subject of worry again.
And one of the aspects that is also treated is the idea of more of the soft geopolitical power of Europe. I think you already mentioned that. How can Europe stay positioned and not get tangled into the divide geopolitically? Is there also a message to Europe you want to highlight in this?
Well, this message is beware. That's the strong message of this GEAB, as beware of what is coming from the other side of the Atlantic. I mean, the US are a hurt power, bleeding power somehow, so they need help. They need, but they let's hope that we are not just going to follow their maddening stance with regards to the rest of the world. We think also that this the risk of inflation and of shortages somehow, and disruptions of these rather fluid flows that we had, global flows, results in 2 risks coming from the other side of the Atlantic. First, but with possibilities of impacts on our society, of course, because we're very close, and that's where we should beware. But the first is, of course, inflation could result, of course, into social unrest, and the US society is very divided, very broken. We really wonder how Biden can actually become really what he needs to become, is the president of all the Americans. So of course they're playing, they are working on this aspect, but through a Congress which is very different from a population which considers, the whole Republican camp still considers that it's been stolen its second mandate. Remember, the US political system is not very surprising. It's 2 mandates Republicans, 2 mandates Democrats, 2 mandates Republicans, blah blah, etc. So the Republicans have the feeling that they've been stolen. There lots of Republicans, including not what they call it, canon lunatics, but normal Republicans consider that they've been stolen there. So social unrest with inflation being added to the economic crisis, the unemployment, and this political frustration, that's very scary, in fact. And voilà, if we also have these problems of this inflation again, and possible shortages, disruptions in some commodities, the oil price is rising already, even though and so without cheap oil, the US are going to be extremely weakened, and so we also fear that this, especially on commodities, the price of commodity, the rising prices of commodities could result in also very aggressive positions, geopolitical tensions in this case of looting resources in the rest of the world, using power, hard power. And so again, the Europeans should be very, very tempering this as allies. They should temper these attitudes.
Yeah, I find that it's a very well researched article on all these topics. There's apart from the large article on the US, there's a couple of other articles which I really like to read. One of the perhaps it was still in the larger article. It's about the the digital currencies. I think the GEAB has been following the Bitcoin and everything that happens already over some time, and we see more and more that also the digital currencies are sort of embraced by the central banks, so they are sort of entering the mainstream currency. So how would this develop? Is Bitcoin, for example, just the first of those currencies, and it is more of a pilot currency to shape the way for other currencies? Because there's so many currencies sort of developing and coming up. So what are the ideas on how this could develop?
Yes, we have this rather short article, but quite provocative, saying that the GEAB has been following the evolution of all these crypto and digital currencies. You have to the cryptos are the Bitcoin kind of blockchain decentralized currencies, and then you have the digital currencies, which are more centralized, whether centralized around central banks, therefore public national structures, or supranational, but voilà, that kind, or private, like Libra Diem proposed by Facebook, but which is also centralized somehow. So we have the digital currencies on one side and the cryptocurrencies on the other. And so we've been following very closely the emergence of the project of digital currencies by central banks, by the BIS, etc. Except that today, and we've analyzed already long ago that in fact, at least 2 years ago, we started seeing that Bitcoin was becoming the digital gold of a digital currency system. Except that today we are beginning to wonder if, when we look at the deadlines that states have in the implementation of their digital currencies, which doesn't seem to be anywhere sooner than 3-4 years ago, knowing the situation we have and the possibility of dramatic transformation in 2021, we see a gap between the need to move to something else in terms of currency system. It's been 15 years that we've been analyzing that the global systemic crisis is a monetary crisis. The dollar international system is not sufficient to support the whole multipolar economy. So it's creating volatility, fragilities of all sorts. So that's why we follow so closely what is being imagined to move out and from this dollar-based international monetary system. And we think that still that the digitalization is going to be the solution, but there is a 4-year gap apparently. So what's going to happen during this 4-year gap? And that's where we think that Bitcoin is likely to be the obvious solution in case we have a collapse of the currencies and a hyperinflationary trend. So we highlight this aspect.
Yeah, and it's and there's another article that also introduces, in a way, another new goal, the water, where I find it very interesting that that water is the scarcity of water makes it, yeah, also much more a commodity almost, where we really have to be aware that on one hand, it's a financial almost. Asset, and on the other hand, of course, it's a human right. We have to be careful, and we have to be sure that, in a way, the new technology should not only be there to build big dams. And I find that a very interesting article. I don't know if you want to add anything just to make people read it, because I thought it was really.
Yes, no, it's a very interesting article that highlights, indeed, as you said, the commoditization, the financialization of water, which by some is seen as a way to stabilize prices, and that's somehow criticized by others. So we don't really enter too far into that debate. Nevertheless, we highlight it, as you say, that there are issues around this status of water as a common good, but which somehow could appear as compatible with this financialization. But well, not sure, not sure at all. And lots of caution again is required, and global governance again is required here, and that's what we don't have. I mean, we have a world which is breaking apart with no well, all the efforts that were done 10, 12 years ago to try to invent a multipolar based global governance based on the these emerging powers, among which, of course, China, but not only China, Russia, South Africa. Well, you remember the work we did 10 years ago on the BRICS, saying that the BRICS provided elements of solution and had to be combined with the existing global system. Europe here has a responsibility, not having decided to go that way, to stick to just a very American position, which was they are our competitors, the BRICS. And so today, as we had anticipated 10 years ago, today we have this global disruption, which makes it very difficult to see where the next global governance will come from, and problems like water being, and so many more problems being nowhere to be solved.
Yeah, so the other topic that is also lacking global governance is space. There was a very good space article I would recommend people to read, which is really with a very interesting overview of who is investing where and how the differences between USA, China, Europe actually shape their space policies. So that's also one of the articles which are there.
That's a topic we follow quite closely since a few months, and indeed there's a lot there to follow. It's becoming a very important sector due to the competition you highlight between countries, due to this what they call the new space, this private space. Colonization, let's say, and of course we have this also a bit, I would say, worry again. It's that we have financial markets which have drawn the money of the world to them, and to a few, in fact, on the US side, a few companies, these GAFAs, and they are the ones today who are investing into this space. So is the global money going to go into the space? We think that's an interesting thing to follow. Are a few billionaires putting the money raised from our sweat and work into Mars and the moon? We have this critical way of looking at it, but in any case, we observe it very rationally and looking at exactly what's going on, really.
Yeah, I think that it's quite an alarmist issue, this GEAB. But I'm always glad that you try to stick to the facts and don't make it into some sort of a conspiracy theory. It's really facts-based analysis, which I think it's really interesting. Well, I really look forward to to the next issue. I think you're writing it already almost, and look forward to what's in there, and hope to speak to you next time in digging into the future. Thank you all for watching and listening. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Véronique, and see you next month.